Hello, everyone. Welcome to the webinar by InfoPro Learning. We're going to talk about the L&D trends of 2023 on how to design winning learning programs for a hybrid workforce. We're going to get started in just another minute or two. We understand that many of us are shuffling from one meeting to a next as we are in this hybrid workforce. Go from one meeting, the next one starts probably 1 minute before, and you're still in your last one. So these days we like to give an extra minute before we start the podcast, just for those coming from one meeting to the next. But for those that were ahead of time and on time, we appreciate you. Please just stick by. We have a lot of people joining in, and we want to give them the opportunity to see the webinar in its entirety. Thank you. All right, we're going to get started. Thank you, everybody, and welcome to the webinar on how to design winning learning programs for a hybrid workforce. Some housekeeping out of the way first. We are going to record this webinar. That is the first question we always get asked, and we're going to send you the recording. So don't feel like you have to take frantic notes. You will have the opportunity to go back and listen to the webinar, to listen to the recording. It will be provided to you. Usually give us about 2 business days to produce it and share it with you. And this is usually the GoToWebinar platform. For those that are not familiar with it, there is a Q&A panel that you can open up and explore. If you ask those, we will actually answer those after the event. So please do put any questions you have in there, and we'll follow up with you after the event so that we can answer those in time. Well, we're going ahead and get started. Thanks, everyone, for joining. Housekeeping's out of the way. Let's go ahead and kick it off. A little bit about the company putting on this webinar. We are InfoPro Learning, been in the business for just about 30 years now in this space. So we have quite a bit of experience. Our primary offering is unlocking the potential of people. Those people can be employees, they can be customers, they can be partners, they can be vendors. If you're looking to help people get better at something, whether that's to be a better manager, be better at, customer service, doing a job, doing a skill, or behavior, chances are that we can support you with that initiative. We are a full service learning and development company that can help with really anything in the whole learning life cycle, from strategy to execution, facilitator management, measurement, administration, and you name it. A little bit about me. I'm Nolan Hout. I've been with the company InfoPro Learning for about 13 years. And you can see my contact details there if you'd like to get in touch with me and ask me any questions on the webinar. But a little bit about me. I love baseball, huge baseball fan. This is the closest team to me in Seattle, the Mariners. I also love to hike. This is one of my absolute favorite hikes. Just happens to be a coincidence. It's also in the Seattle region. This is Mount Rainier National Park. Absolutely a gorgeous park. Recommend going to that if you ever get the opportunity to be in the Pacific Northwest area in the summertime. I have a puppy. His name is Vandal. Here you can see him. He is every bit as lazy and every bit as smug as he looks in this picture. My favorite activity is fishing. This is my happy spot in the summer, is on the river fly fishing, whether I catch anything or not. And this is my gorgeous family. I hope that you're laughing to yourself right now. Every time I see this, I do. Of course, I actually do have a family. This isn't a make-believe family. But my wife has been fairly adamant about don't put pictures of me or don't put pictures of my kids on these recordings for whatever nature. So this is my way of saying, yes, I do have a family. And here is my bad drawing of my family. So today, many of you know why you're here on the webinar, but I do want to let you know ahead of time that this is maybe not going to be exactly the webinar that you were thinking, and that was intentional. We know that when you hear things like L&D trends and managing hybrid teams, one of the big things that comes to your mind are like, oh, I bet they're going to give me the top 5 tips, or here's 6 tricks to doing that. And I tried my best to stay away from that type of stuff. Those are things, if you Google it right now, you can probably find those very quick wins, those very, low-hanging fruits, and you can get the short answer. Not saying that I don't have those easy things on here as well about how to develop learning, for managing remote teams. But it is going to be, maybe a little bit different, and I hope that it's valuable for you. And I really do think it will be. So instead of actually giving you the agenda, I thought it would be fun to guess the agenda. Now, this is not actually, I don't think you'll be able to guess, so don't look at this and think, oh shoot, why can't I guess this? It's more to maybe keep you around to the end to better understand, okay, what might Nolan be talking about in this webinar? What might he be speaking about? So just keep this in mind. At the very end of the slide deck, we're going to come to it. So it will be the big reveal, if you would. So when we're designing learning programs for a hybrid workforce, what is the very first thing that comes to mind? For many of us, it's going to be technology. And I know you're thinking, well, didn't you just say you weren't going to do buzz things? Yeah, maybe, but maybe we're taking it in a bit of a different direction. Now, technology is one of those things that here what we're talking about is understanding the technology of your learner, and understanding the environment that they're in. So as we start to develop new technology in learning, we have to remember that not everybody has the same access to technology anymore, but they don't have the same familiarity with technology anymore. And your ability to walk them through the technology is less and less and less as it's more hybrid. If you are doing a VR solution and you're requiring some type of Oculus headsets, well, you need to, one, have a device that can run those. You need to be able to ship those out to people. You need to account for shipping time, and then they need to be able to ship those back to you. So this is intended to say, as you do create this great technology, which you should do, you should be innovative, you should be doing AR, VR, you should have technology as a core part of your strategy for engaging the hybrid workforce. You do need to realize that not everybody is exactly at the level playing field when it comes to technology anymore. Nobody can take their laptop in to IT within the office and say, hey, help me configure this. So just keep that in mind whenever you go to start developing these high-tech, nice solutions. And I say there at the bottom, definitely includes internet access. Mostly, internet access, for the most part, we can assume in many cases, but speeds is very, very important. As we start developing more engaging programs, those become more bandwidth consuming. If you know that you have an audience that is going to be impacted by that, maybe they're in a remote area, whatever it should be, that could degrade the learning experience. Very important, again, that you ensure that you have the technology needed, that your employees do, especially those remote ones, to run the learning programs that you're trying to do. The second thing that can really help engage and bring in the hybrid workforce is something that we call branded bonding. So if you have a learning program, maybe it's a 6-week course or an 8-week course or a whole year course, whatever it should be, physically sending something to the people who are attending that or who are learners of that will pay enormous dividends down the road. I don't think we take for granted, I think we do take for granted that when we deliver training virtually, we actually lose out on some of our senses, right? We can obviously see and we can hear, but we can't really, we can smell, not that we, want people to be stinking up a classroom, so to speak, but we can't smell, you can't smell the coffee, can't smell the lunch being cooked in the, outside the hall, whatever it should be. We can't touch others, we're behind ourselves, we're behind the screen. So we don't get to engage all of our senses. So sending something to every learner in the program actually helps them bond together around this program. It helps connect them back to that program that you're launching. And it's a great way for the learners to connect with the program, but also to connect with each other no matter where they are, because no matter whether they're in the office or they're digital, they can talk about, oh, did you get that bar of chocolate? Yeah, that was great. And remember, it doesn't need to be something super fancy. It doesn't need to be something branded necessarily. If you can find something with corporate colors, that's the best. But it really can be anything that somehow is going to connect this person to this program. Again, really great for that hybrid workforce, helps bring people together. Onboarding. Onboarding is absolutely critical. We all know this. I think many of us probably went back to the drawing boards with our onboarding programs when the pandemic hit, and we said, "Shoot, well, how are we going to take this session that maybe was some virtual, but had somebody meeting you? How did we make that virtual?" Well, a lot of us overnight created a solution. And maybe that solution now is a time to take a look at that solution is really our advice. And we see a lot of companies looking at that to 2023 to say, okay, the solution we created during the pandemic is okay for remote employees, but honestly, it was just spun up so that we could do something. Now is the time to go back and actually create a hybrid onboarding experience. And maybe what this is you go back to the onboarding experience you had, and those that are in person do that, and you create one just for remote employees. That's also a really good idea. And what you want to do is bring in some of those components that you had in the physical, but in a digital way. Things like making sure that first week is really structured and guided and full of answers to all of the questions that people had. And think of all those questions that get answered in person that maybe don't get answered anymore, digitally, because maybe they're embarrassed to ask the question about their payroll, or when is the pay date, or how do advances work on my paycheck, or just anything like that that might be a little bit embarrassing, or, oh, and remind me, who do you report to again? Those kinds of things happen all of the time in physical onboarding. It's important that as we look to create a remote specific onboarding program, that we take care of some of that unstructured learning that happens along the way. And super important, as you are looking for that remote onboarding, make sure someone is virtually present for that first moment of work. I'm sure, for those of us who joined a company before the pandemic or maybe after, and were able to go in and remember their first day of work, it is surrounded with all types of emotions. But many times you can remember, okay, I walked into the office and I saw my boss, or I saw my team, or I saw welcome to the company, Nolan, or whatever it is. Find a way to make that first moment special, or at the very least, have somebody physically there saying, yes, you're important. Here I am for you. I can't wait for you to get started. And going along with that is a buddy. I think one of the things that we can do within our learning programs, especially for that hybrid workforce, is to create a buddy and a buddy network within your learning program. We've been talking, this is nothing new. We've been talking about social learning for a really long time. This is taking that to the next level and actually saying, instead of creating maybe like a network of, everybody to connect socially, this is saying, actually, let's go find people that can learn together for these programs, right? That allows people to establish those relationships, because that's so important these days. And yes, we understand that, is it the L&D is it the L&D teams, responsibility to create buddies, or is it HR's team to, get people to feel that way? Maybe a little bit of both, but if you can find a way within your learning program to create these buddies, again, it helps with that learning experience. It helps engage employees taking the learning program, because now you're doing much more than just educating them on whatever topic you are. You're giving them a new person to meet, a way to expand their network. And we have here, bonus points if you're able to find a buddy in the learning program who's local. That doesn't need to be the same exact job. They can ideally even be in a different job so that they can learn something new. Um, or again, if not local, then has a local in the job role. So, maybe they're not exactly, maybe you don't pair an instructional designer with an instructional designer, but you pair an instructional designer with a graphic artist, maybe, because they're both designing experiences. Maybe one is focused on learning and one is focused more on a different type, but they're similar. Again, a great way to start building engagement for this hybrid workforce who is desperate for building more connections. In-person activities, we wanted to make a note on this. A lot of companies are approaching in-person differently, and I think that that's really for the greater culture of the company to decide of whether people have to come into the office or not. If it's a strict, we can't force anybody to do anything together, so be it. We're not necessarily saying to go outside of that. But something to recognize is that hybrid workforces tend to push us towards treating certain people fairly. Now, a lot of times we think that this unbalanced treatment applies to the remote people, such as, Nolan comes into the office and so he gets to go have drinks with his boss and gets better connected to them. Man, I wish I lived in the same area as Nolan so that I could go have drinks with my boss. But remember that the inverse also happens, right? So here, so now from Nolan's perspective, the person's in person saying, man, I have to go take this leadership seminar during, between the hours of 4 to 6, this after hours event, when, I wish I was like this remote employee who was able to just dial in during the session, but didn't actually have to participate in the networking event after. So when you are having in-person activities as part of your learning programs, we really want to encourage you that if you have a hybrid audience who is given the option to sit out or participate in a different level, you just need to recognize that both people in that equation may be having a certain feeling towards the other, and recognize that and try to remove that kind of bias towards one another within your training program. And we do have a point here, if you can, if you can find any way to bring remote employees for any type of FaceTime within the learning calendar, that money is extremely well spent. Again, some of these concepts we're talking about today kind of verge on the is this learning, is this kind of HR, but really, hey, our job is to help employees engage and perform better at their job. End of the day, right? We're all trying to improve the bottom line, and if we can do that within the learning department, we should try to do that. And if what it takes to get the remote employee that lives in Boston, if it takes $1,000 extra to fly them once a year to Florida to attend a webinar, a in-person coaching session with 10 of their employees, you can maybe find ways in your budget or within the budget of the department to make that work. Speaking from experience, I can tell you that money is extremely well spent. If you can't get it in your calendar, look to the person, look to the actual person who's doing the traveling and speak to their manager and say, would you be willing to fund sending Nolan from Boston to Florida for this training event? Many times you will see that those managers are more than willing to say yes, because they recognize if they can get their employees all in one spot, regardless of what the purpose is, in this case, if it's training, even better, those workers are going to perform much better in most cases. Manager time, super important here. If you are promoting, learning events, one of your best ways to ensure that you can deliver valuable education sessions throughout the year is through, managers. But we have to realize that managers' time is incredibly limited right now, and most managers restrict a lot of their meeting times to these status checks. What happened this week, what happened last week, what happened, whatever. We recommend, if you can, to prompt managers, even if it is during a status check meeting, to prompt them to say, we're running this learning program, Nolan. We would love that the next time that you have a meeting, what do you think about, asking your people this? What do you think about prodding, your employee and asking them, what areas are you looking to improve yourself in this next year? How did you find this training program? How did you engage here? Again, recognize that the manager's time is very well protected, but they are a great avenue for you to be able to start engaging with the employees in a much different way than maybe you're used to. And we say if you're looking to engage remote employees and you have the bandwidth, we say, at a minimum, try to again focus on some in-person connect with them. We say at least twice a year is great. We talked about that a little bit on the last slide. Getting people together with their manager, there's really no value like it. Alignment. I think this is key as we went remote, and as learning teams, or L&D teams went remote, and our employees went remote. Managing performance and getting aligned with one of each other has actually been difficult, because we don't have the opportunity to stop in and check along the way, hey, are we seeing this project eye to eye? I can't quickly create a mock-up and walk into my manager's room and say, what does this look like? Or what does that look like? Or maybe I do with my manager, but then we're not able to call, Sally, who works in Austin, to make sure, hey, we pivoted into this program and we are now going towards this. Or maybe there's a change in how we want to measure the learning program, and we're starting to capture feedback one way or the other. It is harder to make sure everybody receives that feedback and is all aligned around what that means in this remote environment. So some of the things we say, first is try to find a way, a tool to help become better aligned. The tool component is the little nod to Unlock Talent. That's a product that we have that focuses on creating alignment for remote teams. And there's a little smiley face there because that's a shameless plug. If you're interested in a technology for that, reach out to me. But some of the other things that you can do is to make sure that you are giving feedback and getting feedback to your L&D team. And you can do this through things like capstone projects, where you're asking your L&D team, okay, this is a really big initiative. These are the programs that we're wanting to accomplish from the year, and writing those out and formalizing those amongst your L&D team, so that then that can get translated down. You can do that one layer deeper on an actual assessment of, okay, we're middle of the stream now. We've all agreed on the overall goal of our team, our L&D team. Now we're 3 weeks into the project. Let me just do a quick on-the-job assessment and make sure we're on track. And again, we talk a lot about managers here, and create a manager's guide to translate this into the life on the job as well, right? So the things that we're doing here within the L&D team, giving managers ways to create alignment as well outside of the learning and development team. Survey, survey, survey. We all know this. I don't think really anybody doesn't know the power of surveys and understanding how to engage any employees. But this has become very important that you recognize in a hybrid workforce that there are different cohorts, and we're used to doing this in the learning team. We're used to taking a look at learning surveys and understanding and breaking it up by, okay, here's what new hires said about the learning program. Here's what veterans have said. Here's what people who have been with the company for 30 years or 5 years. Here's what directors are saying. So we're used to taking this survey data and chunking it together to understand how well we did. It's important to realize that we now have this other cohort called the remote employee. And when we are doing surveys, we want to understand what are the differences between how people answered those surveys. Are we noticing a big difference between the program from in-person versus the people hybrid? That tells us we have some gap one way or the other. Maybe we've gone from what we are seeing from a lot of our clients these days is there is more of a bend towards a reliance on the remote, because we pretty much took our in-person session and made it remote just like very quickly. And it wasn't necessarily designed for a remote learning session. But now that we're in a hybrid environment, we've kind of defaulted to this remote learning, which maybe works really well for the remote, but for the in-person, maybe not so much. So really important reminder, do surveys, understand what your workforce is saying. And the little tip at the bottom, the voice of the customer needs to be more than just whether they're passing the assessments. I guess that really says it all, right? Just because people completed the training or did the training doesn't necessarily mean that they're happy or that they were engaged. You need more data than a binary yes or no. Innovation. This is probably, this is the buzzword that everybody was looking for, right? You came to a session on how to engage remote teams, and you expected probably to hear virtual reality. Once I wanted to make sure I didn't let you down. Unfortunately, it's really just a word on the screen. So virtual reality doesn't have to be the answer to innovation. And I think that's really an important reminder. Not that I'm picking on virtual reality, I actually think it's great. I did a podcast recently on how virtual reality program was launched to remove bias in the workforce. An absolutely amazing, amazing program, and I think it has its place. But when I talk about innovation, what I'm really talking about is finding ways to do things better, right? More value, more engaging, maybe faster or less expensive, right? When we talk about innovating, that's usually what we're trying to do. Music became better to listen to on an MP3 player because I could put 1,000 songs on it instead of having to carry around 1,000 CDs. It made it better, it made it faster, and actually, it ended up making it less expensive as well. But you have many of these probably within your organization. And so when you look to this year, don't necessarily think, oh, I have to be the Jetsons here. You don't have to be so forward looking. A lot of us are in this spot of, okay, we moved everything remote because we had to, but it wasn't intended for hybrid. Again, most clients that we're consulting with today, they didn't design their learning programs for hybrid. Right over the past 2.5 years, they've designed their learning programs for remote. And now that are back in the office, they're starting to say, okay, well, do we engage them the same? Do we engage them differently? So when I say innovation, first start with that. I say first start with, let's have this innovative idea of understanding, are the programs that we're doing today engaging for all of our learners? And then you can look to, okay, are the ways that I'm creating these learning programs innovative? Am I using tools in my process to make it better, again, faster, less expensive? So don't always look to this next level technology to be innovative. Look to the unsexy things. Look to your processes. Like look to, who would have thought, right? For those of us who are all following, AI and Chat GDP or GPT, who would have thought that maybe the sexiest innovation in the year was going to be artificial intelligence writing content for us, right? Nobody would have said that was going to be there, right? That maybe not necessarily sexy, but if I'm able to use a tool like that, Chat GPT, to write, let's say 60% of my content for me. Well, guess what? I saved 60% of my time creating that learning asset. Yeah, I'm not saying, and for those that have used it and those that haven't, I'm not saying that the content is the absolute best and it's going to replace everything for you, but it's going to be faster than having to do it all by yourself. Look at your process. Look at how you're running your operations. Look at your trainer facilitation rates, right? Am I fully engaged with all of my trainers, or do they have a lot of downtime? Okay, well, maybe if my facilitators have downtime when they're not doing live webinars or live sessions, maybe I can have them do some recorded sessions and post that content to my LMS so I can increase the utilization of my team and therefore increase the ROI. So again, I think I've beat this horse. Technology is great. Definitely, I'm not saying don't do innovative, cool things. I'm just saying sometimes you can take a look at what you've already done or take a look at what you're currently doing and just finding a way to incrementally do better. You don't always have to go to this very future, everybody's wearing headsets. And connected to that is this idea of white space. I think we have removed a lot of white space from the equation in our lives, in our work lives, that's for sure. I taught at the very beginning of this webinar, if you remember, I said, I'm going to give some, maybe you relate, so you didn't hear it, but I said, we have started giving more time to people to join the webinar. It used to be everybody was either on time or 5 minutes early, but now we start most webinars 3 to 4 minutes late. Because in the digital world, in the hybrid world, we're all on Microsoft Teams meetings. We don't have to account for the buffer time to walk out of the conference hall, go back into our office, and start the meeting. We are frantically saying, sorry, I got to drop, exiting out of Teams, going to our Outlook calendars and launching the next meeting. The white space has been removed for a lot of us. It's important that you recognize that this happens because of the hybrid nature of it. And realize within your L&D team that what this means is that they're not having the time to think, what does engaging a remote or hybrid workforce look like? What does hybrid learning look like for us? And it's so important that we have this time, or even if you don't have a lot of time, even just a culture of allowing your team to feel like they have the time, right? Some space to realize that whatever plan we put forth for 2023, right? We all, at this point, most of us have already detailed what we want to do in 2023 when it comes to engaging our remote workforce and our hybrid workforce, I should say, sorry. But as we all know, plans change. Instead of chalking every, single workday to the brim, give yourself some flex. Actually plan on some flex. Know that along the way, things are going to change that are going to change how you view engaging remote hybrid employees. We have seen, right, with Twitter. Twitter was a hybrid workforce. A new CEO enters the mix, and it no longer is a hybrid workforce. And it literally was like days, right? The employees there had days to get through it, weeks, like a couple weeks to respond to that. Now, that is an extreme case, but these types of things happen. So have some flexibility in your programs, account for it. Save some space in your budgets for it. Understand that there might be new things that you need to account for, right? Everybody comes back to the office, okay, all of my training that was remote for the hybrid team is now in person, which means I now have to double my lunch order on my lunch and learns. I used to if you weren't in the office, I didn't, you get lunch on your own. Well, now I got to add a little bit more money to my budget to account for these people coming into the office and actually eating the lunch here. Maybe, a very stupid example, but an example nonetheless. Save some time and save some money for things to happen. So wrapping up, I hope many of you have created an answer key at the very beginning of this when I said, what is the agenda? And you've been waiting on bating breath, or probably by about slide 3, you kind of got where we were going with this, if those of you were following the pictures of each slide. But in conclusion, when we look at how we can look to engage the hybrid workforce within learning and development. If we start in the top left, here we're talking about a buddy. Having a learning buddy. Again, nothing new to the learning and development organization, but creating this person in the hybrid world to connect hybrid and personal and create some of those social connects that we have lost. And if you can do that built within your learning program, that creates stickiness to the learning program and to the employees themselves. It is really a win-win around the board. Speaking around creating that connect, we have branded bonding. Physically sending something that can elicit the senses that we are not able to do so when we are in specifically for your remote employees, but to be able to create a shared experience for your remote and for your in-person that they all couldn't get unless they were touching something or tasting something or smelling something. Really, really important that you elicit those other responses through doing something to connect your learning program through, again, we call it branded bonding, something you can send them. If it has your logo on it, all the better. But really what we're after there is that experience. Technology. I'm not talking here about technology necessarily that the L&D teams are using, but understanding the technology of our learners. It is not uniform. Not everybody is using gigabyte internet from your corporate office. Some people are using internet at their house while their kids are also watching Netflix and consuming all the bandwidth, and they're playing video games in the other room as well. So they don't have the speeds that they need to run these super intensive graphic rich learning programs. Just keep it in mind that it is no longer a given that everybody's going to have the technology. As the innovation is growing within the learning and development area, we need to ensure that we actually don't outpace our learners. And then we talk about in-person. In-person, again, for managing or engaging, how does L&D engage this hybrid workforce? I think throwing it in person, you're like, oh, well, that's kind of cheating because that's not really hybrid. But what we wanted to call to the forefront here was the idea that understand that they're two different learners. And if you can connect them both in person around something, the engagement will go up. We know that. We don't necessarily need to be taught that. It's nothing new to 2023. But what is new is to remember that when you create learning programs that have in-person elements, it's important to remember that both learners, the in-person learner and the remote learner, is viewing that program from a different light and viewing the people in that session from a different light. Just keep that in mind. Fifth one is onboarding. If your onboarding program was, okay, we have the physical onboarding program, and then we just have the digital version of the physical onboarding program that works for everybody who is remote. That is not a remote onboarding program, because you more than likely didn't account for some of those in-person things and trying to replicate those digitally. Maybe you did. Maybe you absolutely did. And if you did, you have nothing to worry about here. But really what we're talking about is creating a hybrid onboarding experience and ensuring that the onboarding experience of a hybrid worker gives the same feeling to the in-person worker. And here, again, a lot of this is not necessarily, e-learning versus mobile learning. It's the design of the program itself and the engagement points and creating room for these experiences and the memorable moments that you get on the first day. Bottom left, we talked about innovation. And innovation doesn't always have to come from creating something brand, spanking new, I should say, implementing brand new technology. It can be implementing a better process. It can be automating something on the back end. It can be better utilizing resource time. There's many ways to innovate. It doesn't always have to come from technology. It doesn't always have to even be something you have to spend money on. Sometimes you can just spend a little bit of time on it. Speaking of time, we did talk about managers' time and how managers' time has been condensed. But the one nice thing is that most managers now, to engage their remote employees, they are having these meetings, and how learning and development can start having an impact on those meetings by putting things into their sessions about coaching, mentoring, connects back to the learning programs. Any prompts that we can give to those managers who are strapped for time, anything we can give to them as a tool, as a reference, as a guide to coach or mentor or prompt these employees, whether they were in person or remote, um, are very much well received. We talked about surveys. We know surveys are important. Again, this is nothing new for 2023. I think my big, takeaway, if you take away anything on the survey, it's to remember that you're in a hybrid environment. You have to look at results of the learning program in two light. You have to look at, what did my remote employees think? What did my in-person remote employees think? You will find unbelievable gems around the learning experience that you designed, is if you're analyzing that as an additional cohort that you're already doing. And if you're not doing, if you don't have, surveys built within your learning experiences and your learning programs, then do it. It's not incredibly difficult. If you're maybe behind the 8 ball, right? There's that famous saying of, when is the best time to plant a tree? And the best time to plant a tree was 10 years ago. When is the second best time to plant a tree? Well, it's today. If you haven't done surveys before, if you don't even know what I'm talking about, reach out to me and happily kind of get you started. But here again, we're talking about gathering data from the experience of the learning program. Not did they take it, did they finish it, but what was their experience like? Ninth one, the bullseye, we're talking about alignment. Alignment is incredibly difficult when we're talking about hybrid teams, because so much conversation happens now that is structured, but unfortunately alignment a lot of times happened unstructured. It happened from, at the end of a meeting, everybody walking out of the room saying, oh, well, what about this? Oh yeah, that's a great idea, let's go with it. That doesn't exist in a hybrid world. There is not that session where, oh, quickly, let me pop in and talk about that, or let's change paths really quickly on this, that, and the other. That happens, that alignment, when we're talking about a hybrid team, it is critical that the L&D team themselves understand that it's so important that they become aligned on what they're trying to accomplish, and that they have those checkposts along the way to say, this is what we wanted to do as a learning and development organization. This is what our core goals were. Now, how often are we coming back and looking at those goals? As a shameless plug, I said we do have a tool that can help with some of those challenges, and to reach out to me as well. And the last one, the 10th one, the astronaut, is white space. Plan on white space for two reasons. One, it helps your people innovate. It really does. It gives them time in their day. A lot of their white space has been removed. We go from one session to the next with very little time in between. We don't have time after the meeting to think, what did I just hear in the meeting? Because we're immediately on to the next one. Plan time in their day, plan time in the month, plan time in the budget to give people time to innovate. And on top of that, plan on some things going wrong. Plan on a little bit of white space within your organization to realize that 2023, while right now might look okay, we're already starting to see, lots of changes in the, we're kind of, are we hitting recession? Are we not hitting a recession? Well, is it a real recession? Is it not a real recession? Is it a big one or not? If you're going into this year thinking it's going to be, oh, finally we're back to normal, I don't necessarily know if that's the best strategy. So let's go ahead and plan on things not going as planned. And with that, we're concluding our webinar for the day. I really want to appreciate everybody sticking with us to the end of this webinar today. Again, I know we went down a path that is not necessarily normal in webinars, and I will admit that for us, this is something new as well. We decided that we wanted this webinar to not necessarily be about those things that you see on every top 10 ways to improve your learning team in 2023. If you wanted those quick answers, there's blog posts, we've written blog posts on it. We wanted to more talk kind of conceptually about some of the actual real life things that we've experienced from our clients coming to us with the challenges of engaging in L&D's response to this hybrid workforce, and how are we going to create learning programs to impact this hybrid workforce. So I hope you found it valuable. If you didn't, we also want to know specifically, you can email us at info@infoprolearning. Let us know one way or the other, whether you loved it, whether you hated it. Your feedback is incredibly valuable to us. I promise you that. If this was a miss, it was a miss. If this was a success, we will do more of these types of things. And again, please do check us out at infoprolearning.com. We're always having webinars and conferences and sessions and speaking on lots of topics. So if you have a project coming up, if you're needing a little bit more help and you want to understand, check out our website. We have a lot of valuable resources for you to find on that. And with that, thank you again, everybody, for joining the webinar. I'm Nolan Hout with InfoProLearning. Have yourself a wonderful day.